Yeah,
Ridiculous.
Zoom. It looks good, sounds good. It's easy. Okay. All right. Thanks for joining me, everyone. Charles Moskowitz here, live on YouTube and subscribing platforms. Alex Newman's my guest. He's a columnist, he's an author, he's a writer with a New American Magazine, investigative reporter, really a worldly sort of a guy. I mean, he's traveled, he's written extensively on all aspects of the New World Order, what President Trump calls the deep state, accurately. Alex, thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be with you.
Alex, turn up your volume if you don't mind a little bit there.
Let's see.
And I guess, look, we have to talk about the election. It's only 5 days away. The opposition is fierce, and it has an element that has done everything possible to depose this president from the day he was elected. There has been a conspiracy to literally overthrow the government, something that I think is unprecedented in American history. And here we are finally within a few days, and all of a sudden, ironically, I don't know, but the pandemic propaganda is really ramping up. And people are being told that they have to stay home, interestingly, on election day, I would assume, and put on the mask and all of that. And that there is an unprecedented media blackout on the Biden scandals. And it's open, it's brazen. I mean, the NPR has outright said they will not be covering this. I mean, this is unprecedented. I mean, we know that there's censorship, but I can't think of an example in American history where it has been so pervasive, so open, so complete, and so brazen. So, what is your take on that? Firstly, and secondly, your overall, call of the election?
Well, the media blackout on any and all information that makes Biden look bad is so blatant and so in your face. I don't think the media is ever going to be able to recover its credibility after this. And thankfully, Tucker Carlson has been banging the drums on this, and he has
Yeah.
more viewers than any cable TV host in all of American history. So no matter how much ABC, NBC, CBS, Washington Compost, New York Slimes, and all the rest of them want to pretend like it's not happening, millions and millions of people are figuring it out. Those millions and millions of people have friends and relatives who read and watch those other fake media outlets. They are going to be made aware of it, and the fake media is going to be left with egg all over their face, wondering, why didn't I read about this in my newspaper? So I think the media has now just discredited themselves to unprecedented levels. And that is an undeniably good thing. People need to know, there is still a fringe out there that believes the media is telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Those people need to be disabused of that obviously self-evidently false notion as quickly as possible to get our republic back on the right track. The social media censorship, I think, goes right in tandem with that. I think it's the same deep state that runs the fake media and the social media, or anti-social media, as I call it. And they're now at the point where they're censoring the president of the United States. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
they've really stepped in it. The Facebook literally took down Trump's post saying that the COVID was less deadly than the flu, which is of course a fact, even based on the government's own numbers. Quit hiding in your basement, Joe Biden, and come out and have a rally if you can get more than 20 people there. As far as the election goes, Chuck, I think. If we had an honest election, if we had an honest vote count, I think the landslide for Trump would be absolutely earth-shattering, probably unprecedented in all of American history. I mean, everywhere, and I've been traveling, I've been ignoring the COVID as much as I can. I've been in red states, blue states. Just in the last couple of months, I've been in Georgia, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, Alabama, Tennessee, all over the state of Florida. We've been through Maryland, West Virginia, regular Virginia, Vermont. I mean, I've been everywhere. And everywhere you go, it is just endless seas of Trump signs, except in the big cities where I think people are a little bit scared that some lunatic Pantifa is going to throw a brick through their window. I just came from Sebring. I gave a speech there last night. They had 327 cars participated in the Trump caravan. The Biden caravan had a grand total of 7 vehicles. to give you an example of how lopsided the support is.
Hmm.
The only question is how much vote fraud is there going to be, and will the tsunami of Trump support be able to overcome that vote fraud? I believe it will be, but the vote fraud I think is going to be off the charts, unlike anything we've ever seen. It's so blatant, it's so in your face. They're just counting on the fact that Democrat prosecutors put in place by George Soros are not going to be coming down on them. So.
Yeah, I mean, that seems to be their only card left. And you're right to note the enthusiasm. I mean, I'm a lot older than you, but I cannot remember a time in American history where there has been this kind of a popular movement. It is surging in all 50 states. You see the caravans. He's getting the ethnic vote. Apparently, he's up in the Hispanic vote. I think it's 40, 45%. The black vote, blacks are coming out for Trump up to 40, 45%, particularly black men. I think black men identify with Trump's masculinity. Um, the Jewish vote, even my fellow Jews in New York, there's a Trump, Jews for Trump in Brooklyn, when people throwing garbage at them, but nevertheless, right? They're out there. And, I think that Jews, kind of quietly, they say to me, we're voting, don't tell anyone. But, right? I mean, because even their own families, you can't talk about it, but it's happening, and it's huge. And I think that if Trump captures that vote, that's going to have like an earthquake like effect. It's going to be like, McGovern in 1972. They're going to be knocked down to like a nothing, and they're going to have to purge their own party of all the left wingers and maybe try to come back. It'll take another generation before they can come back with a reasonable candidate. I mean, the Democrats, it took them a long time to recover from that. So, yeah, I mean, from my lips to God's ear, I think that's what's going to happen. I think he's going to increase his margins in all 50 states. I think he may pick off a few more states than he had, maybe even Minnesota. Looks like a possibility. People are tired of the rioting where you have black neighborhoods being burned and black businesses looted. And who knows? I mean, it would be a miracle. I mean, I just can't wait. I'm like, I can't sleep. I mean, it's everyone. It's like, right? I mean, the anxiety of it is just. I look at the news like about 100 times a day, and when you look at something like the Drudge Report, your heart sinks because they have, Biden ahead by 20, Biden ahead by 50. I mean, and I think they quoted The Economist, which is in the English establishment deep state paper, saying that there's a 94% chance that Biden is going to win. What the hell do they know? I mean, it's just. But when you look at this stuff, you really have to. It just. It really shows how they're gonna play this deal.
It's psychological warfare. It's the same thing we saw in the 2016 election. The Huffington Compost said it was 98% sure Hillary was going to win.
Oh, yeah.
The New York Times said 92% chance that Hillary was going to win. They were so sure. They were so locked up in their bubble of propaganda. They were even going to press with this stuff. I think it was Time Magazine ran their publication with the cover, Madam President. And oops, they had to eat
Oh,
that.
yeah.
And I think we're going to see
What a great
something
night
again.
that was.
It was beautiful.
I can't wait to see Rachel Maddow's face.
Oh, the tears are going to be never ending.
Oh, man.
I think what's going to happen now, you're right. The Democrat Party is going to have to do some very serious soul searching. I mean, are we ever going to win an election by running actual Marxists, Maoists, communist revolutionaries, by having a communist platform that rejects God, that rejects freedom, that promotes wholesale slaughter of unborn babies shamelessly, that promotes abolishing and destroying and undermining the police? It's just, they're so out of touch with mainstream America. So what I think the establishment is going to have to do here is they're going to have to try to make lemonade out of lemons. They know that there's an economic crisis coming that is going to be absolutely massive. We've got 60 million Americans who filed unemployment since mostly Democrat mayors and governors locked down our economy. They know that they've been printing trillions of dollars like it's going out of style. They know we had a GDP contraction in the second quarter thanks to these lockdowns of 33%, according to the Bureau of Economic Analysis. They're looking at this and they're saying, wow, the chickens are going to come home to roost. Perfect. If Trump has to be in the White House, at least we have a nice scapegoat. We'll say it was all Trump's fault. It was all those dummy voters who didn't like globalism, who believed in America, who supported free markets. We're just going to blame all this economic calamity that's coming on Trump, and we'll make lemonade out of lemons. I think that's going to be their tactic if and when they lose, because they have nothing left.
And I don't think it's going to work because really, what do they offer as an alternative. But what still worries me is that Main Street America, regular people, people that are not like you and I, who are news junkies and who are in the business of looking at what's going on, they still get their news from Lester Holt and from Nora O'Donnell, and they are not talking about the Biden scandal, which is massive and which would knock any ordinary candidate probably in the can.
Yeah.
They're not talking about it. All they're talking about is whether or not somebody was seen not wearing a mask at a Trump rally, right? I mean, so that worries me because they still have that kind of high ground. And there are people, I mean, Tucker Carlson may reach, he's a great host and he's reaching a lot of people. Now they're throwing mud at him, by the way, and trying to say, oh, well, he made something up because he got something in the mail messed up. Um, I just worry that they're not going to get the message. I mean, do enough people really know about this? I mean, it's out there if you and I look at it or if you dig for it. But I know people in my own circle who know nothing about this, and they've never heard of it. So
Yep.
that's a problem. That's a
It's a
worry.
huge problem, and we had Twitter and Facebook just openly censored. You couldn't share the link from the
Right.
original New York Post story. So that is a hurdle that's going to have to be overcome. And I think the establishment thinks, well, as long as we can keep everybody locked in their basements and everybody terrified of each other, nobody will talk about it. Everybody will just depend on the TV. I think over the long term, that's going to be a failing strategy. Even though some of them are still scared of COVID, they're still going to gather with their families for Thanksgiving dinner. And the idea that this is not going to be a topic of discussion, it's just silly. And, if you come up and you say, well, I haven't heard of that, I would say, oh, are you one of those dummies who spends all day watching CNN? Okay, let's all point and laugh. Right? So they are going to have a very serious problem on their hands here if they don't address it. I suspect they'll probably move toward the deny phase as soon as they think they have to. But they're going to end up so discredited. I think the much bigger risk now is the long-term problem that they are brainwashing the youth, and this as well as anybody. They are capturing the hearts and minds of the young people for socialism. My
They are.
generation now, according to the scientific poll commissioned by the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation, 70% of millennials say they're socialists, and
They do. Yeah.
that's going to be the problem that we're going to have to deal with down the line. Now, I just got done with Alan Keyes on his program, and he had a really interesting hypothesis. It really made me think. He said, we are now at a stage in American history where we came so close to death. People are going to realize that. It's kind of like a junkie. Once you hit rock bottom, you realize, whoa, I've got to change things. And so hopefully we're going to see now a turning where Americans will go back and recognize, wow, we really came close to losing it all. We've got to do something different. And, Trump is now speaking about the education system. Home run. He said in his Independence Day speech that the reason for the mayhem in our streets is that they're brainwashing our young people in the schools. That is going to have to be the focus over the long term if we want to turn these kind of victories that we've had in recent years into long-term gains that will put America back on a solid foundation, get us on a solid footing to move forward in the future, preserving our political institutions and our liberties.
Absolutely. I mean, they still control the cultural high ground. They control the
Mm-hmm.
educational establishment. Trump supports school choice, which I think is appealing to black voters, by the way, rather than keeping black kids locked up in these rotten public schools in the big cities where you have, propaganda being spoon fed to them and where they're not able to read and they're not able to think cognitively due to the education. I think that is starting to catch up. And I hope it catches up in time. You have the Democrats put a lot of investment into this whole idea of early voting. You have 10 states who sent out massive ballots to people, even unregistered voters. The good news is, of those 10 states, 8 of them vote blue anyway. So it's not like Trump is going to lose. And 2 of them, probably, which is Utah and Arizona, Trump's ahead. So I don't think that's going to make it for them. But they're trying to push the envelope in terms of getting late votes. There's one person I think that is going to put a stop to that, and that is none other than Amy Coney Barrett, if it goes to the Supreme Court, if it has to, and if there's not a big vote for Trump. But the early vote, they put a lot into it. It hasn't panned out for them, as that's what I've understood. I don't know if you have any data on that, but it is true that Biden's a bit ahead in the early vote, but not enough ahead to matter. And the Trump voters are coming out big on election day. These are people who are not afraid of the coronavirus. They realize that if you can go to a grocery store, you can go out and vote, and they're going to do it, and it's going to be huge. That's why they're hyping up the coronavirus right now to scare people. That they're coming up with new death statistics, and they're trying to get everyone to lock down. Do you have any information about that with regard to the early vote and what you see on election day?
Yeah, I actually looked at the Florida data just recently, and despite the claims of the fake media, it is not nearly as lopsided as the fake media would like one to believe. And in fact, if most independent voters end up supporting President Trump, and I'm confident that they will, um, it's very possible that Trump actually has a lead, even in the early voters, even in the mailing voters here in Florida. Now, I haven't looked at the data from other states, but I think the media is creating a blatantly false narrative here. And we also have the fact that Trump has specifically said on multiple occasions, guys, I don't want you voting by mail. I want you to go and vote at your polling place. He said Florida was an exception because we had a decent governor. And actually, we had a problem in Broward County where a bunch of criminals were running the election system down there, and they got caught. Basically, they just keep manufacturing votes until they had enough to get their candidate elected. So our governor has actually replaced the supervisor of elections down there. That's where Donna Brazil comes out of. That's where Debbie Wasserman Schultz comes out of. And so our governor actually sent one of the top prosecutors down there and said, look, guys, no more of this stuff. We are now removing the supervisor of elections. So Florida, Trump said, was one of those states where it was safe to vote by mail. But Trump has said repeatedly, guys, it's better to go vote in person at the polling place on election day if you can. I think the numbers, if we had a legitimate vote, would be so lopsided, Charles. But then you look also now, all this evidence of voter fraud is starting to come out. And no matter how much the media tries to suppress it, this information will trickle out gradually. Project Veritas just released another one this morning. They've got video of people in Texas on camera talking about how much they're charging to harvest these ballots and to deliver fraudulent votes for their candidates. These people, even if they don't get prosecuted at the state or local level, once Trump is reelected, I think a lot of these people are going to end up in jail. The evidence is there now, some of it gathered by Project Veritas, some of it gathered by law enforcement agencies and other organizations that are in this space. I really hope that this will be a time of cleansing for America where the criminals end up behind bars.
Well, the problem with that is that Project Veritas is being censored.
Yep.
And this information, I think it's enough to get around in Texas, and that's going to help. But most people are not aware of this, and they still look with scorn at the accusations of voter fraud, even though it's rampant. And you can find examples of it across the country. The other good piece of news is that most of the new registered voters are Republican. In Florida, it's about 2-1 Republican. Yeah. Same thing in Ohio, Michigan.
Massive crossover too, Chuck. We've looked at the data for the crossovers. There are many, many more Democrats registered as Republicans now than the other way around. The numbers are just so lopsided. Here in my community, Republicans outnumber Democrats 3-1, and the numbers are getting better and better for Republicans. So something big is happening.
And I also think a lot of Democrats are going to vote for Trump. And my proof of that is that the Trump rallies register people, and I think it's about 20% of them going to those rallies are registered Democrats.
Yeah. So, and at the grassroots level, this is becoming very clear. The Democrat Party can't contain this anymore. They've got a prominent black Democrat legislator in the state of Georgia saying, hey, Trump, go Trump all the way. I'm a Democrat, but Trump is the man. You've got the mayor of Flint in Michigan. I think it was Flint, Democrat. Who came out and said, no, you got to vote for Trump. So, the establishment hacks in the Republican Party, the kind of rhino elites that were so prominent in the Republican Party, a lot of them defected. And all that does is prove what the American people, what Trump has been saying all along. There is kind of this deep state, and for a long time, it has had its claws deeply embedded within the Republican Party. Now, all of that's being exposed. The more of these fake rhinos like William Kristol and these national security professionals, the former head of the RNC, the more they cross over and say vote for Biden, the more they prove Trump has been correct all along. There is a swamp. There is a deep state. Their intention is to destroy the United States, and they must be exposed.
Well, they've always been enemies of Trump, and that's, that hasn't changed. What about the Congress? What about the House? What about the Senate? Do you have any data on that? How are we doing?
I haven't looked as closely at that. I suspect that the same fake polls that told us that Biden was going to win in a landslide, that Hillary was going to win in a landslide, I suspect the bias that the fake media is using to say there's going to be this massive, surge of Democrats in the Senate, and that the House will definitely stay in Democrat hands. I suspect that's a lot of the same bias. They're way oversampling Democrats. They're manipulating their polls in every which way, and I suspect that holds true in the congressional races and in the Senate races. We shall see. But I think it would be common sense that if they're rigging the polls at the presidential level, the same thing would be happening in Congress.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they're going to hold on to the Senate. They may even lose a seat or two, but they'll hang in there. And I don't know about the House, but I do think that they're going to close that gap if they don't take the House. I mean, they'll be hanging. The Democrats will have it by a thread. So it'll be a glorious day. It's coming up. I think one of the first things that Trump is going to do is he's going to get rid of Anthony Fauci, and he's probably going to get rid of Ray over at FBI, who has sat on the Trump laptop, on the Biden laptop for almost a year. If that had been released when it should have been released, it would have never been the perfect phone call hearings. But
Yep.
so there's a lot of corruption there.
Yeah, and I'd say there's a whole bunch of these swamp creatures that need to go after the second election is finished. And I'm really concerned about Mark Esper, the defense secretary. He's a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. He has openly defied Trump and contradicted Trump. He, very publicly came out against using the Insurrection Act against the insurrections that are taking place in Democrat-run cities and states. That's simply unacceptable.
It's insubordinate to the civilian head of state.
Exactly.
That's what MacArthur, even though he was a great man and one of the great American figures of history, nevertheless, Truman was right to fire him because he was Truman as president, and you don't have a military man, be insubordinate to the civilian head of the government, and he was.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, I totally, I think that's that, and there's a lot of them apparently in the military. I think that Obama seeded the military with various types and purged out loyal figures in the military and in other elements of government. So it's going to take a long time to bring the ship of state right, and we can only hope that happens. Alex, what are you working on now?
Well, I'm doing what I can to expose the coronavirus craziness. I just am releasing a book. It'll be out probably officially next week. It's called Deep State: The Invisible Government Behind the Scenes. Basically, a comprehensive look at the deep state, who these people are. I mentioned the Council on Foreign Relations. That's one of the groups that we'll be scrutinizing how the deep state operates, who the money men are, people like the Rockefellers and the George Soroses and the Bill Gateses and all their, foundation money. And then finally, my conclusion on how we stop that. And then I've got a series on education that's been in the Epic Times. We're going to be turning that into a book, God willing, hopefully very soon here. I'm on part 18. I've got a couple more parts to go, and then we'll be turning that into a book as well. So
excellent. I can't wait to read the book on the insiders and to have you back on. So thanks so much for joining me, Alex Newman, New American Magazine author. Thank you very much.